Welcome to Orchid Medley Chit Chat number 14. We have a lot to cover today. All of these orchids and more coming up at the Orchid Hut. Welcome back. My name is Dana and thank you for joining me today in another Orchid Medley Chit Chat video, which is always quite unpredictable because I bring you an assortment of orchids from my collection and we just talk through some of the things that are going on at this particular time of year. However, these videos are always timeless because depending on where you grow in the world, it could be something that's happening with your orchids. Okay, so first off, I'll let you know that as I'm editing this video, I will put a timestamp for when we move into the discussion about just the Phalaenopsis orchids. I will save those towards the end of the video. We'll have a little bit of an introduction. I'll do all of the orchids that are different, and then I'll save all of the Phalaenopsis discussion for the end, and I'll put a timestamp for that. I actually put some notes in front of me today because there's so many little different topics that I want to cover. The next thing I would like to mention, hopefully I still have your attention at the very beginning of this video, if there is a viewer of this channel, and if you would like to send in a photo of one of your orchid blooms, then I will be having a look through those and will post at the very end of August my thank you community post, and I might choose to feature your orchid photo. But please, if you do send a photo in, first of all, my email is in the description below this video, but if you do send one in, please mention your username on YouTube so that I can give you a shout out and give you credit for your orchid photo. And then let's just go ahead now and move into the orchids. I will be having some inserted clips along the way because I didn't bring all of the orchids indoors. So as we talk about a few, I'll insert some clips. And in order to get started, I think I will move the two Phalaenopsis out of the way. We will get to those at the end of the video. And we're going to start with the orchid that's in front of the camera. This is Dendrobium Maiden Charlotte. I did a short video of this orchid this morning. And just a little bit more information here. This one has just had a world of trouble for the last year. It's had spider mites. It didn't get enough light over the winter. It's been outside for the growing season. It has grown some very weak new canes, but I just didn't care for how this orchid was looking. I decided to take it out of the pot, and lo and behold, no root system whatsoever. So I have trimmed this one, cleaned it, repotted it in such a way so that maybe there can be a bit more moisture retention around where there should hopefully be a new root system someday. And I'm just going to go ahead now and bring this one in because I just am not getting the sense that our high temperatures outdoors are really helping this one thrive. And the short video is about preparing for winter. Now it's even hard to think about winter being right around the corner because it's just so darn hot, but winter will be here. And if you are repotting an orchid at the end of August and into September, you may want to just go ahead and decide to bring that one in if you typically have to bring all of your orchids in for the winter anyway. And the reason is because you've gotten all of the bugs out of it, you've inspected it, you've sprayed it with hydrogen peroxide, which is what I did with this one. And so you're not probably bringing anything into your indoor growing area that you don't want around your other orchids or inside your house. So now that this one is completely cleaned up, it will be spending the remainder of the growing season under the grow lights, and we will see if this one does any better. So throughout the fall, I will be posting the various steps that I go through to prepare my indoor growing space to bring all of the orchids in for the winter, and avoid having problems doing that because they have been outside now since March. Okay, so that's that little tidbit. Now this orchid, I did something kind of, well, maybe a little bit unique to it, and so I wanted to share it with you. This is my Encyclia David M. Johnston. It is a primary hybrid between Moebiusii and Atrorubens. And this is probably one of the very few orchids that I grow in complete sphagnum moss. I maybe have one or two others, but this one came from the grower in sphagnum moss. I noticed early on that it was a very, very thirsty orchid. It needs watering more frequently than most orchids. And instead of disturbing it to repot it out of this net pot with all of the sphagnum moss, I just decided to add some sphagnum moss around the edge between the clay pot and the net pot. And so I'm hoping to not have to disturb this one for, another couple of years. It has room in the net pot to continue putting on more pseudobulbs, and this is its new growth for this year. It's a relatively slow grower, but it seems to be, for the most part, happy growing in my bay window area. It's up closer to the glass where it gets more sunlight. It has not bloomed for me, but maybe this new growth will produce its first bloom. All right, so I just wanted to share an update on this orchid. I think the last time I showed it to you, there was just the tiniest bud down here for this new growth, and it has grown quite a bit over the summer. Okay, now next up is like the orchid with a long running history, a very, very sort of long story in its background. This is Miltassia Dark Star, and it's been in my collection, I would say, for about 4 years. And it's just got this long running, very, very strange history. When I received the plant from the grower, it was in a tiny pot, and it was this lush looking plant with many, many, many pseudobulbs. And I had it for a while growing in the bay window, and all of a sudden, like 2 different parts of the plant just died. So that was the moment when I unpotted it, and I realized that the grower had stuffed many small plants into one pot to make it look like a more mature plant. And honestly, those 2 smaller divisions that were stuffed into the pot were probably never going to grow on their own anyway. So those were discarded, and I repotted up the 2 larger pieces. And the orchid never did seem to be particularly happy growing in the bay window. Both plants had these pleated leaves, which was an indication that it wasn't getting enough moisture. So then in like year 2 or 3, I moved both of the plants to my grow light area, and the same sort of thing, no blooms, pleated leaves, and one of the plants even died, and I just discarded it. So for this growing season, I said, what the heck, may as well put this one outside in the bright shade and see what happens, because clearly it's not really enjoying growing indoors. There's some element that's missing. And if you look online for this particular Miltassia, and for Miltassias in general, there's a lot of confusion about how to grow them. So Some will say they're intermediate growers, which would lead you to believe you should try to grow them indoors. And others will say that they're warm growers, and some say that they need, filtered light, and others say, well, they need to have bright shade, and then other sources will say they have to have some direct sun in order to bloom. And by the time you read all of the information about Miltassias, you will be very confused about how to grow these, and I think it comes down more to experimentation than anything. So I have had this orchid outdoors now since about March. It has put on this new growth in that time. The leaves are not accordion pleated any longer because I have been watering this more frequently since it's been outdoors, maybe like every 2 or 3 days. And so it probably has enjoyed the humidity. Clearly, it tolerates the high temperatures. Now, it has not gotten any direct sun, but it has had all day long bright shade. And again, lo and behold, there is a bloom spike. Now, this is a gorgeous, gorgeous purple bloom. Fingers crossed, this one will continue to grow and bloom for me at some point, in which case it will be a first-time bloomer after about 4 years in my collection. And, hoping that's going to turn out just fine. Now, this plant is not particularly strong, so I will probably let that bloom out, photograph it, film it for you, and then cut that spike away because this orchid clearly needs to be repotted. It needs some sort of, different setup here because it's, growing over the edge of the pot. It tends to be a bit of a climber on top of that, and this media now is at least a couple of years old. We're going to hope for the best here, and fingers crossed I'll have a Miltassia bloom sometime soon. Okay, now back to the Phalaenopsis orchids. The first thing that I wanted to mention is that this is the time of year for Phalaenopsis when you really want to see good, strong root growth in the pot. Now, this first one that I want to show you was an orchid that I repotted. The name of the video is The Ultimate Phalaenopsis Repot, and I'll put a link in the upper right hand corner to that video if you would like to go back and watch it. It was from a couple of years ago, and this was the orchid where I had to take most of the air roots and bury them, inside the new potting setup, because that was about all that was left, was the air roots. But you can tell that those air roots have produced new root growing tips, and that is exactly what we were hoping for, that these air roots would adapt and begin to create new roots inside the pot. So I'm very, very pleased with how this has turned out. This orchid can probably stay in this pot for another year. This is one that has not bloomed for me in a while, so maybe it will set a spike this year, and then this will truly be a success story. Now, just as another example, this is another one that you can clearly see the new root growth in the pot is robust and healthy, and this is the setup for being strong enough to bloom in the coming blooming season. Okay, so next up, I'm going to be inserting a little clip here of my extremely large Phalaenopsis. This is one of the gigantic white ones, and it's typically in my bay window, but it has started developing a spike, and I am trying desperately to light train that spike, because if I don't do that, then the spike is rather large. Like, I think I had up to like 17 buds on it one year, and if I don't first train the spike upwards and then arching over, it will consume far too much space in my bay window area. So I have this set up in another room with a grow light positioned directly over the top of the plant so that the spike will initially grow up, and then I will be able to put in a stake and have it arch over so that the length of it can be, you know, up high in the bay window growing area. Okay, so the very last thing that I want to show you is another clip here that I'm going to insert, and this is outdoors. This is the Grammatophyllum that I repotted earlier this year. I'll put a link in the upper right hand corner of the screen for that repot, but I wanted to show you that it has a gigantic new growth developing just now after the repot. So very pleased with how that one is doing outside on the bench in one of the highest light areas that I have outdoors for growing orchids. Okay, so I thank you all for joining me today. If you like this video or learned something new, please give it a thumbs up. The subscribe button is coming up in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. Don't forget the notifications bell to let you know when I've posted something new. And talk to you all next time.